Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chee Leong, and I'm going to be giving you a 1 hour session to talk about building resilience during this MCO period. I'd like to welcome all viewers and participants this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me this couple of weeks. Last week, we had a session on managing stress for my colleagues as well as members of the public. And today we're going to continue that series on, building resilience in this very challenging times. I realize that, this month being an MCO and dealing with different challenges in our workplace, in our homes, as a result of the COVID crisis. Um, Among other things, I think teaches us how to delve deep within ourselves to find resources to cope with challenges, to cope with change, to cope with stress, to cope with pressure. It's usually during times of crisis like this that we realize our limits, and in some ways also we will learn to stretch our limits, and that's not an easy thing. But certainly, it's an important thing as part of our own development as adults, as well as for children as well. Last Thursday, we had a session particularly for parents, talk about how to um, help your child uh, be prepared for this VUCA environment. Right, the world is a VUCA place, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And um, and I think one of the points that we made was the fact that um, as parents we need to be setting an example. And so as adults, as educators, as leaders, as parents, we need to be showing um, how we cope with times of uncertainty, and how we remain tough, how we remain strong, and how we find resources within ourselves to cope with difficult situations like this. So I want to talk about building resilience today. Now, in a sense, it's related to stress. So last week I shared some thoughts about about stress and how we cope with stress, particularly during a lockdown period. I guess today session is sort of like a part two. All right. I want to give a special shout out to all of my colleagues in Real and Sri KDU that are joining us today, as well as I've noticed some members of the public have also joined us, some of my old students and friends and family members. So welcome everybody. Thank you for taking time today to share some ideas with us. All right, so I'm going to start as a means of introduction. I start with this question of, how do you, how do you, how do you, how do you prepare yourself to conquer Everest? And so, sometimes in workshops, I say, I mean, imagine a hypothetical situation where you had 3 or 4 years to prepare to climb Mount Everest. And let's assume most of us don't have a lot of mountain climbing experience, and we've got 3 4 years to prepare ourselves, and the question is, how do we, in a sense, get ourselves ready? I think if I were to ask that question, probably some of the answers I would receive would include things like, we will need to get ourselves physically fit. We will need to raise our stamina levels. We would probably need to acquire, very specialist mountain climbing skills. I mean, climbing Everest is not the same thing as, walking up, Bukit Gasing or going up Kinabalu. It's more than just stamina. We will need to learn things like snowcraft and rock climbing skills, and how to, breathe using, oxygen tanks, and setting up, base camps and tents, and eating at high altitude, being able to deal and acclimatize to high altitude. So I think if we were to list the different things we needed to do, they would be along the lines of becoming fitter, acquiring new skills, learning teamwork, mentally preparing ourselves, and if you think about all of these things, one of the things they have in common is that the focus is very much on us, not so much the mountain. The mountain doesn't change. In a sense, the challenge of climbing Mount Everest remains the same. What changes would be ourselves. I wouldn't be able to climb Mount Everest today. Maybe in 5 years' time, with a lot of preparation, I may be able to. But what's changed about the equation, therefore, is not the mountain, but myself, right? And so I wanted to start with this illustration because when we are talking about building resilience, that's the analogy, right? Climbing Mount Everest is about making yourself stronger, more prepared, mentally, physically, skill-wise, and I guess building resilience, whether you talk about psychological, emotional resilience, or even physical resilience, it's a similar thing. You're talking about how do we make ourselves stronger rather than how do we make the task easier. So I start off with this, that when we talk about resilience, it's embracing the fact that life doesn't become easier. Unfortunately, life is not easy. And as we go through life, we go through many different challenges, many different experiences. And I think what we are going through now, with the COVID situation all over the world, being in lockdown, dealing with an economic recession that is coming, and all of the challenges that brings business-wise. I mean, this is an example of a crisis and a challenge. But when you think back to your life so far, this is not the first. Yeah? Our lives have been, in a sense, a series of going through different challenges, from the time we were young to the time we are now, and a variety of different challenges. So whether they are financial challenges, whether they are work-related challenges, whether they are physical challenges, to our physical health. Some of us have gone through, perhaps times where you've had acute sickness, gone through diseases, life-threatening illnesses. So it's a physical crisis, or to do with relationships or family, or the environment we are living in. And so I guess my point is that life is about developing the strength to be able to deal with these challenges and these crises. And so when we talk about resilience, it's not about hoping that life becomes easier, because I think those of us who have been around long enough will realize that life doesn't become easier. There are good days and bad days. Thankfully, not every day is a crisis. So I don't want to sort of overemphasize the fact that life is just one misery after another. So that's not true. There are good days and bad days. There are times where we have a lot of joy and happiness, and times to celebrate victories, but there are also times where we experience and defeats, so every mountaintop experience, is accompanied by a valley experience, where we, in a sense, walk through, in a sense, the shadow of death, or the valley of death, and it's a dark place, So I think for those of us who are adults, we realize that life is like that, and the good news is that crisis will pass. So this COVID situation, it will pass. It's difficult now, but a day will come when we won't be in MCO lockdown anymore, when the disease and the pandemic has passed us, and life will go on. But my point then is that there will be other challenges that will come our way. So I think this is an important point to note. I remember when I was a lecturer teaching in university, I talk a lot about this because the lesson I think we're trying to convey to the young generation, to the next generation of leaders and workers, is that I mean, you need to be prepared, like, mentally. You can't be expecting that life is just going to be easy all the time, and that life is going to be comfortable all the time, and life is going to be predictable all the time. So whether it's your career, your family life, or your own own personal life, I mean, they're always going to be surprises, and they're always going to be challenges, and that's when you need that resilience. So it's not about expecting or hoping that nothing bad is going to happen, or nothing challenging is going to happen to you in your life. It's about saying, okay, look, I'm expecting that sometimes life will be challenging. So how do I focus on myself? How do I focus on how I can become stronger, physically and emotionally and psychologically, so that when the challenges come, and they will come, I'm more ready for them, right? So I think that's sort of the stance. I mean, that's the whole approach of resilience. It's realizing that no matter what you do in life, I mean, however competent, whatever choices you make in life, you're bound to encounter challenges. And so it's about preparing for those challenges. So what I wanted to share today was 6 keys to building resilience. And it's a combination really of, I mean, some of them are, mental exercises, mental habits. Some of them, I think, are really just good life management skills that help us, I think, create both a habit, but also, create resources from within ourselves to be able to face challenges. So without further ado, let's get to the first one. So number one is building a clear sense of direction. Now, this is something I touched a little bit on when I was doing the parenting session last Thursday. This sense of taking time to think about, where we are in life, but also taking time to think about where we are going in life. All right. The analogy I like most is that of sailing in the ocean, and so imagine that you're captain of a ship, and you're there, and let's assume, as you can see from the picture, that this is not a modern day cruise. This is back in the 14th, 15th century, and you're in this sail ship, the kind Vasco da Gama and Alexander de Albuquerque sort of took to come to Malacca, and you're, let's say, sailing from Malacca to let's say to Hong Kong, right? And you're sailing past the South China Sea, and in the middle of that voyage, let's imagine for a second that you're hit by a storm. And so the whole night, you've got the wind and the waves and the rain, and everything is just chaos, because you've got the fury of the storm, and you, as a captain of a ship, you're just trying to keep the ship afloat, right? So all of the crew members, they're running around, everybody's sort of throwing things off the ship to take off weight. You're steering the ship. Lots of things are happening, and everybody's just trying to survive, right? And so let's imagine for a second. I mean, the storm passes, and thank God, the morning comes calm. The sea is calm, the storm has passed, and let's assume everybody's alive, all right? And the ship is still afloat. And I mean, using this analogy, my question often in workshops is then, as the captain of a ship, I mean, what do you check before you continue your journey? So what are the things you should be looking at, right? What are you, what are you, in a sense, examine within the ship before you can continue your journey? So the usual responses would be, some people would talk about, oh, it's what do you call it? You check, you do a damage check to see which parts of the ship needs to be repaired. I mean, and so that's why in those days you had carpenters to sort of you had carpenters to sort of make sure that the whatever is broken from the ship can be repaired. Some people talk about, we need to check on the state of the crew. Does anybody need medical attention? Because I mean, usually in those days you had a medical doctor and a medical team there to see to all of the crew members. Is anybody injured? And how are they being looked after? And so we can go through the whole list of things. And what about supplies? Do we have enough food and water to, in a sense, continue the journey? Do we need to make a stopover to get more food and water, resources, supplies? But eventually somebody in the audience would then refer to, don't we need to check our location? Where are we? And that's really the key, isn't it? The storm may have blown you, whether it's east, west, north, or south. And so one of the first things you do after a storm is to try to get your bearings, right? Where are you? In the South China Sea, and has the storm blown you off course by 100 miles here or there? And that's important because then you need to readjust your course. And so related to your location is also your direction. And this is something I think all sailors, all fishermen, anybody who is ocean will know that. I mean, the key thing is your location and your bearings, knowing where your north is and south and east and west, knowing where you're facing is incredibly important because, I mean, if you lose touch with your bearings, then basically what happens is that you could be sort of, sailing around in circles for months and die in the ocean and get lost without ever reaching your destination because, you have no idea where you're facing, And so in the sea, that's incredibly important. And that's why sailors, whether they use tides or they use the rising and the setting of the sun or they use the stars, all sailors and fishermen will know how to find their directions even without a compass. And so this illustration of what do you do after a storm, this analogy really is meant to illustrate the importance of personal reflection, right? So the first tip for building resilience is that you need to spend time, every 3 months, every 6 months, every year at least, particularly after storms in your life, after really busy periods, after difficult periods, after stressful periods, after major changes and transitions in your life, that there needs to be time taken to just stop and be quiet and be by yourself and to create that space and time to think. And what do you think about? Well, I mean, in all of those things that we talked about earlier, you can think about, your damage check. So what parts of your life need to be repaired and fixed? You can think about the relationships in your life. That's really important. All of your significant relationships with family members and friends and colleagues, and whether any of those relationships need to be improved or repaired. Maybe it's a check on resources that you need for the next 3-6 months to continue your journey. Do you have, what you need in terms of your career, in terms of knowledge, in terms of energy, in terms of your health, to survive the next part of your journey? And what do you need to do to replenish some of these resources if you find that you're under-resourced? But I mean, most importantly, coming back to the point about location and direction, is personal reflection is about time to think about where you are, right, in your life, and where are you, and are you happy with where you are? Are you where you want to be? Are you where you plan to be 2-3 years ago? In terms of your personal life, in terms of your career, in terms of your financial health, in terms of your own personal development, your spiritual health, so all aspects of you as a person, it's time to think about, I mean, where are you, and are you facing the right direction? So relative to your goals in your life, relative to your chosen destination, what do you want to accomplish in your life? Your calling, your personal vision and mission. Are you facing in the right direction, or in the last 6 months or 1 year, are you drifting away, further away because maybe the different storms in life, the busyness, a lot of distractions, a lot of sound and noise has maybe led you astray, I mean, has like a storm blown you off course. And so the personal reflection time is an opportunity to then reorientate yourself and adjust the course of your life and where you need to be going. All right. So I've taken a bit of time to talk about this because this is probably the most valuable tip that I want to share with you today, which is you want to build resilience and strength in your life. You need to live a more self-examined life. So the 2 points, the 2 words I put here are deliberate living and purposeful living. You know, so you don't want to live an accidental life, just sort of being allowed to float with the tides, and you're blown back and forth, and you know you have very little control, very little purpose, about what you want to do in your life. And I think this often happens when we are too busy, so especially those of us who are working adults, and every day is basically just surviving the next day, the next week, surviving to the weekend, and then starting again, and there's no time to think about what we are doing in our life. So a lot of people don't find time to do personal reflection. So I just want to encourage all of you that I think this is something that you can do now. I mean, ironically, the MCO certainly gives us time and space to do personal reflection, and you just find a quiet corner in your house, in your room, and it's 3-4 hours, half a day of putting aside the handphone and the emails and the work, and just spending time to think, all right, about these things that I've talked about. Where am I? Where do I want to go? And for those of you who say, well, Chee Leong, I don't even have a goal, so I can't orientate myself, because it's been 10 years, 15 years, forever since I've actually sat down to think about what are my goals and objectives in life. Well, then even more important to do personal reflection. It's even more important if you've never had a chance to ask yourself the question, what do I really want in my life? What do I really want to achieve in my life? Then I would say personal reflection is an absolutely must. Do it before the MCO ends, right? And what you can take away from that, at least then, is a clearer sense of where do you want to go in your life, and what do you want to achieve, right? And accomplish in the different areas of your life. So whether it's your career, or your spiritual life, your financial life, your personal life, your relationships, and all of that, right? So that's tip number one. It's about building a clear sense of direction. So people with a clearer sense of where they are and where they are going, and of what they want, you find that they tend to be more resilient. And the reason why this is linked to resilience is because they have a longer term orientation. So when there are crises, and like I said earlier, there will be challenges and crises that we encounter every day, every week, every month, every minute sometimes. We are therefore not focusing on the short-term crisis or the problems. We realize that going through crisis is just a pathway to take us a step closer to where we really want to be. And because we've got a clear sense of orientation, a lot of these crises also don't take us by surprise. I remember, I just want to talk a little bit about goals and life goals and the power of that. And taking time to reflect on what really is important in your life. I remember this was early 2000 when I just come back from New Zealand, and I was, psychology, hit in help, and I was teaching psychology, and I remember we were doing research on the sales industry, and we had been employed by one of the largest insurance providers to come up with a training program on things like stress management and resilience, but also skills for their sales agents and their insurance agents and their financial planners that were sort of doing work every day. So what I did was actually spent a good 2 months with agents. I spent time with them, went to their meetings, some of the top agencies in Malaysia, top performing agencies. These were really inspirational people. I learned a lot from them about motivation, about life goals, about resilience, about dealing with disappointments and setbacks. And so I would spend time with them. I would drive out with them on sales calls, see clients with them. And so this was really a good deep dive for me to understand, right, the whole culture of insurance and sales. And I remember there was a young man that I met. He was a Malaysian, all right, an Indian young man who had just started selling insurance for about 3 years. He had started it quite early from school, and his story is one of the most inspiring, that I've heard for many years until now. And So we were talking about motivation, and this young man, I mean, he works from 6 a.m. all the way until midnight every day. He is making the cold calls. He's, talking to people. I mean, you go to McDonald's, Starbucks, 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 midnight. He's still there having meetings with potential clients. And so I talked to him about what drives him and what gives him this energy and stamina to be able to work at such a high level day in and day out, and how does he deal with the stresses and pressures. And so he told me a story about what drives him, and the fact that he had come from a very, very poor family. I was a single mother who had raised him and his younger brother. I mean, they had no money at all. They had no property. They were living in a slum area, a squatter area, all their lives. And the mother was a cleaner. And every day she would go and clean offices. And, through that dedication, she raised these two, young men. And so his motivation was to buy the mother a house. And so he was sharing with me that he had worked out, he would need about 4 years to earn the commission needed, on top of supporting his mother and his brother, to actually save enough money to put in the down payment and to have enough money in the bank to make the monthly payments on a terrace house, somewhere this was somewhere in Puchong. And he had even identified the house, and he had showed me, I mean, these are the housing areas he's looking at, these are the price points, and this is how much more he needed to save. And he was telling me at that time, look, Dr. Goh, I need about 8 more months and I would have met my target. And so I would have working for about 4 years, non-stop every day to sort of save up this money. And what I was going to do, I haven't told my mother about it. He was telling me, I'm going to go in, I'm going to make the down payment, I'm going to, get the keys, and then I'm going to, bring her on, in my car to this house and surprise her and say, Mom, thank you so much for everything you've done for me. And for the first time in your life, this is your house. This is something that I want to buy for you. And I mean, I found it incredibly inspiring. I mean, this was, early 2000. I mean, it was incredibly inspiring what this young man was willing to do for the mother. And I use this as an example of clarity. I mean, we talk about personal reflection, being clear about your sense of direction. And so for this young man, his future, his purpose, his goal, crystal clear. The thought that he has in his head every morning when he wakes up, crystal clear, for 4 years, every day, Sunday to Saturday, was that I'm going to go out there, I'm going to work hard because I'm saving money, because I want my mother to wake up in a house and not worry about one day a bulldozer coming in and, flattening our squatter house. I want her to feel this sense of safety and security, that she's looked after us all our lives, and this is a thank you as a reward. And he did it. I mean, he bought this $450,000 house, and I think it's an amazing story of, when people, in a sense, clarify in their minds what is really important in their lives, that sense of focus, direction, and therefore the discipline also to achieve that clarity, of thought, you find that these are the people that are the most resilient. When challenges come, when difficulties come, and they will come, good days, bad days, COVID crisis, recession times, they certainly suffer as well, but they don't waver from that goal. They are able to better overcome, these medium-term, short-term challenges, because their eyes are on the long-term price. And I've got another story because, during that same time, I was also talking to a single mother, and she was in her early 50s at that time. She had 3 daughters, and what she did, now this is very early, 2002, 2003. She had saved up, she had been working in insurance for about 25 years, and had saved up enough money. And I think the total at that time came up to about 1.5 million, split among these 3 daughters, who one went to Oxford, one went to Cambridge, one went to, I forget, I think it's either Australian National U or Melbourne University in Australia. And it's an amazing story. And so talking to this mother, and the joy and the gratification she felt working all those 25 years to give her daughters a better future, a better tomorrow. Again, that clarity of focus, right? So first thing I want you to do, is spend time doing personal reflection. Spend time thinking about what is your true north. I mean, what do you really want in your life? What is important? And what are you living for? And I think once you've got these questions clear, you will find that when the stresses come, whatever the stresses are, whether it's financial issues, economic recessions, problems at work, I mean, all of these issues, you find that you're not going to allow these problems and current day worries overcome you, because you've got a bigger prize and a longer term picture in mind. All right. So some stories to illustrate that importance of purpose. Okay. Tip number two. So we're sharing about how to build resilience. Right. So tip number two is about developing healthy time management habits. Right. And the idea of how to manage this resource that you have. I remember there was a workshop leader, that talked to us about the fact that time management is really life management. When we are managing time, we are managing life. And I think that's absolutely correct. That's absolutely true. All right. That managing time is managing life, and so I've got one particular habit that I think is important, that if we integrate it, and I think becomes a regular habit in our life, will certainly make a big difference in terms of our level of resilience moving forward, because this habit helps us manage particularly stressful and busy and chaotic times. All right. So I want to introduce you to something called the Eisenhower decision matrix. I mean, this was made famous when you read a lot of books, a lot of life management books, time management books. I think there's no time management seminar or workshop that probably doesn't have this matrix somewhere in there, right? So it's called the Eisenhower decision matrix. And what it does is that you can see it splits everything you do in your life, so all of your life activities, into 4 boxes, right? So there are things that are important and urgent. There are things that are important, not urgent. Things that are not important, urgent, not important, not urgent, right? So we use this as a good tool to think about all the different things we do in our life, but it's also a good tool to see where the time is being sucked away, and where are the time wasters, and where should I be actually shifting more time to, so it's a good tool, right? To think about how we use time. So we say, okay, well, firstly, first step in that is how do we reduce things that are not important, and things that are not important are defined as things that are really add no value to your life, right? I mean, they have no good, whether you do it or you don't do it, it makes no difference in your life at all. So it doesn't have any impact on your social health or your physical health or your spiritual health or your financial health or your career health or any, it doesn't do any good to you. It doesn't make you happier. It doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't help you grow, right? So those are things that are, in a sense, the time killers, the time wasters. So, strike that out. But draw your attention to the other 2 parts of the matrix. The focus really in time management workshops is on important, not urgent. All right. So often, they say, okay, look, you really need to draw attention to that part of the matrix, right? What are things that are important, so they add value to your life, but they don't need to be done right now, so they're not urgent, right? So at this point of the workshop, I usually ask for ideas from the audience, from the participants, so you can sort of write in what you think are important, not urgent. But the usual will be, I mean, number 1 on the list, usually people talk about exercise, right? That's sort of the most common thing that is important. Is our health important? Yes, it is. How do we stay healthy? Is exercise important? Oh yes, everybody says yes. All of us should exercise, go jogging, take a walk, exercise in our house. But is it urgent? Nobody says yes, because I mean, the thing about exercise is that, hey, you can always do it tomorrow, isn't it? You don't work out today, work out tomorrow. Of course, now we've got, I guess, a sort of a convenient excuse of, but the idea is even now, of course, you can exercise at home. But I mean, there's always some excuse, right? So we say, well, look, if I don't exercise right now, I'm not going to die of a heart attack. So, hey, look, no big deal. Something that can be postponed, right? Financial planning, have we done a long-term plan of our financial health? Is that important? Yes. Is it urgent? Not really. It's something that, we can postpone to next month, next year. Planning a holiday with your family. I remember in one workshop, a few of the young people there, they were talking about, yeah, hey, look, taking time to go on dates, developing my social life, finding a life partner. Hey, all of those things are important for your happiness, for their particular life goals. But, that's not urgent, isn't it? I mean, there are always more urgent things. And usually it's things like work, deadlines, things that we have to do every day, every week, And those things, in a sense, then take precedence. And so the danger about this important, not urgent column, and you can go on and on. So whether it's physical health, spending time with your family or loved ones, finding a life partner, financial planning, enrolling for further studies for those of you who want to, go on and do further self-developments, staff training, all of these things, important, not urgent. And of course, the thing about this is that if they remain undone, because they're not urgent, so we put them at the back and we procrastinate. Eventually, what happens to them is that eventually they become urgent, right? So this is just like when we were growing up, is it important to study for my SPM exams? Oh yes, now is April, SPM is in October, November, important, but is it urgent? Nah, lots of time. Whether it's homework that is due on Monday and therefore it's not urgent because it's Friday now, I've got 2 more days. And of course, that's the whole truth. Don't do your homework and now and the homework is due tomorrow, then it becomes urgent. Or now it's September, it's 1 month before SPM. And of course, then all of our students suddenly wake up one day and realize, oh, everything is urgent already. So things that are not urgent, when they're not tended to, very quickly become urgent and important. And I guess this to stress management, life management, it's the problem, isn't it? When your whole life is important and urgent, we say your whole life is have to do. You have to wake up in the morning, it's jogging, it's urgent. Why? Because hey, your cardiologist is telling you, you're going to die of a heart attack any day now, so you've got to exercise every day. So it's become urgent. And then after that, you have to fill up income tax forms. Why? Because, okay, you procrastinated and the income tax deadline is soon, filing deadline. So you've got to get that on time. And then you've got to go to work and you've got to go, and do whatever it is, 7-8 hours of rushing stuff. Why? Because we waited to the last minute to actually fulfill our deadlines and timelines. And you come home and you've got to spend time with your husband or wife or children. Why? Because, hey, look, they are already going to divorce you because you're not spending any time with them at all. So, when your whole life is just urgent, I mean, there is no surprise then why we are not stressed, isn't it? Why we are not stressed every day and we are under pressure every day. And life is so difficult because everything we are waiting to the brink, right? We're waiting to the last minute. So I think this tool is really useful in identifying what is important, not urgent, and then having the discipline to do it before it becomes urgent. And this is a good exercise. I mean, I do it every month. I've advised office staff, departments, leadership team. So those of you from my organization, 3KD and Real, I mean, I would say this is a good exercise to do every 2 months. Get your whole department, 3-4 of you in a room for 30 minutes and just identify what are the things that are important, not urgent. And you come out with a whole list, right? Of things, we can planning for next year, strategic planning, succession planning, talent management, doing this. And a lot of it involves actually planning and preparing for next year or preparing for the next 2-3 years. And we say, well, it's important to do, but you know what? It's not the most urgent thing. I've got more urgent things to do this week. So all of these things get put to the back burner until they become urgent and they become a crisis and a problem, right? So I think whether you do it in your workplace, whether you do it in your personal life, it's about every month or two, just taking a few minutes and identifying what is in that box, right? So this box, sorry, what is in this box? Important but not urgent. And making that list and then having the discipline to say, hey, look, this 2 weeks, I'm going to put this in my scheduler and my diary because I know if it's not there, I'm not going to do it. And then having the discipline to follow through and make sure it's done, right? So do things that are important, not urgent. That's the second tip, how to build more resilience towards difficult and stressful times. Number three is building thought management skills. Now, I shared a little bit about this last week. It's about taking perspective, changing perspective. So I want to go through this a bit quicker. I mean, in psychology, we call it cognitive reframing. It's rethinking our perspective, how we see problems, difficulties, things in life, right? And so I'll give you a few examples, so one of this is the most common. We say, don't see life as a problem, see it as a challenge, an opportunity to grow. Last week I talked about Nelson Mandela, right? 27 years. It's about perspective. I think I was talking about this during my parenting talk on Thursday, that, a lot of us, we complain about life, complain about all the things we can't do during this MCO in particular, a lot of moaning and groaning about the limits we have because, we are sort of stuck in our homes for 4 weeks or more. But Mandela spent 27 years, this was a picture which I showed on Thursday about his prison cell. And once a day, he got 1 hour to walk the yard, and that was it. That was all the outdoors he could see in Robben Island off Cape Town, But what he did in that 27 years was remarkable. He finished a university degree there, University of London external program. He prepared himself as a leader, as a future national leader to lead the country. So, it's about perspective. It's about asking ourselves, do we choose to be prisoners, or do we choose to see opportunities in every day, right? I shared, this quote from Helen Keller last week as well. Life is a daring adventure or nothing at all. I love this quote because, again, this is, these people, have the guts, man, and the gumption, to actually look at crisis in their lives. Helen Keller was, of course, somebody who, because of illness, became blind and deaf, so couldn't see, couldn't hear, and yet, became a author, an educator, an accomplished, a person that had a huge impact on different things. And so this idea of, whenever there are challenges, whenever I'm stretched as a person, I see it as the next step of this adventure. It's not easy to do. I like this quote, when you look at a mountain, you see a barrier. When I look at a mountain, I see an opportunity to challenge myself. So again, all of this is about perspective taking, isn't it? So, when we see mountains, often, we see it as a block, something that blocks us from getting from point A to point B, right? Something that gets in our way. And so usually when we see mountains, we sort of, blast a highway through it, or we build a tunnel through it, because the mountain is seen as something that is negative. It stops me. But what mountain climbers are saying is, hey, that's not true. I'm a mountain climber. The mountain gives me my reason for existence. The tougher the mountain is, the better. So you see it as something negative. I see it as this is the exciting part. Without mountains, there are no mountain climbers. And so I want the difficulty. I want to be stretched. I want the struggle. I want to have to fight. To stretch myself, to strong or brave or disciplined or courageous or intelligent I am. And this stretching, that's an essential part of life. I remember in one of my classes in university, I sort of gave this hypothetical to my students. I say, okay, look, let's imagine, let's say I'm the richest man in the world and I'm a football fan, and I want to bring the top football players to this region. And I say, hey, look, what if I can throw as much money as I want, billions of dollars? And so I go out there and I pick, some of these top football teams. So whether it's Liverpool right now, of course, they are probably one of the top teams in Europe. Manchester United used to be, Barcelona, Real Madrid. So these kind, all right, okay. So I go out there and I say, okay, look, to all of these great teams and great players, and I say, look, you know what? Whatever you're earning right now in Europe or South America or all of these, football, summits of the world, right? Whatever your salary is every week or every month, I'm going to double it. Okay, so that's the value proposition. But you need to relocate here to Malaysia, and for the next 4 years, you need to sign a contract here, and you need to play football here for the next 4 years. Here in the Malaysia Cup or the Premier League here against our local teams here. And my question is, given that amount of money, would they do it? And I think that the answer is, in most cases, they won't. I mean, not the top players. I mean, you're not going to get the Liverpool first 11 to come over, or the Barcelona or the Real Madrid or all of these, like I say, top players. I mean, you're not going to get them over here to play because, I mean, at this stage, with all due respect to football here in Asia or in Malaysia, which is at a high standard, but I mean, they want to play against the best in Europe, right? And they see their career as just being, hey, look, about 10 years of their prime. And they want to be playing Champions League football or in the Premier League, in Spain, in England, in Germany, and that's it, So even though I may be offering them a lot more money and in a sense a much easier life, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be a lot less stressful being here, away from all of the pressure there. I mean, in Europe, so much pressure. I mean, you don't score goals for 1-2 weeks. The press is on you. I mean, there's so much pressure from the public, from the fans. And so, I mean, what I will be essentially offering them here is, like I say, more money, less stress, which is, I mean, we think about it, that's what most of us want. More money, less stress. But I mean, you think about how many of them would come, and like I said earlier, almost none. That's the irony, isn't it? Because most of them, they want the challenge. They are not looking for an easier life. What they want is to be playing at the peak, challenging themselves in a sense, the most high-pressured, stressful situations, because that's the only way to find out how good a footballer they are, right? How good an athlete or sports person they are. So I mean, human beings are funny that way. Sometimes we don't know what we want. We think we want something less easy, no challenges in life. But I guarantee, I mean, most of us would be bored after, a few weeks, a few months, without that sense of challenge, that thrill of being up against the odds and having to stretch ourselves. So anyway, right, I come back to this, that it's about perspective taking, right? It's about how we see different challenges in life. I shared last week about letting nature help us retain a sense of perspective. I think I shared the story that when I first came back from New Zealand and I was working in Malaysia and just getting used to working here in a more high-paced work environment and getting stressed every day as a new lecturer. I used to go to the travel section of bookshops and look at these beautiful pictures. This is, by the way, the Sakura, right, in Japan, which is also a high-pressured, high-stress society. And during Sakura season, this is a big thing, right? You go and have picnics, and you go out there with your friends and your family, and you have to book places, man, to get the best seats just below the Sakura so that you're looking out right like this view, and you're able to see the beautiful cherry blossoms, in the background of the beautiful blue sky. And for a moment, all of that stress and that pressure, for a moment, I won't say disappears, but a moment it puts your life in perspective, because nature, the largeness of nature. So whether it's the sea and the ocean, or open fields, or mountains, lakes, hills, waterfalls, the scale of nature, what it does is that it reminds us of the fact that there is a life that is bigger beyond our problems, right? That the world is much larger than our workplace. And it's important to be reminded of this, right? Okay. And I shared this quote last week as well, this quote by Alice Earle, who was a writer and an educationist, who talked about, learning to savor every day, right? Okay, so let's move on. Number 4, building social support. Now, this is really important. So you find that people who are resilient tend to be people who have social support networks. So they're not doing it by themselves. It doesn't mean to be a strong person, you need to be alone. It's not about being a hero. It's about, the strongest people who are able to sustain resilience over a long period of time are people who have got social networks. Now, it doesn't mean they need hundreds of people. I mean, it may just be a few people, but they have social support networks. And so here I want to share 3 in particular, right? So who are the key resource people that you need in your life? There are 3 categories here that I put in the slides. And the tip here really is that you're going to need to find these people. And so, these people don't just drop from the sky. They don't happen by accident. You need to take an effort, make an effort to go and connect and find people that you're comfortable with that play these 3 roles, right? So let me go through them one by one. Number 1, the mentor and the coach. So this is the person that, particularly for you who are working adults, these are people who can be mentors and coaches in terms of your own career, whatever role you're playing as a leader or a staff or anything, right? And so, for example, those of you who are teachers who are watching this mentor and coach could be a senior teacher, could be a principal, could be somebody who has taught for a long time, and you look up to this person because they've got more life experience. They are a bit further down the path than you are. And so this mentor and coach is useful because they are the person you go to for things like work and career advice. I don't know how to deal with this. How do I manage my boss? How do I manage this project? How do I manage this difficulty? How do I manage this technical task? And so the fact that they are well versed with your work, your industry, it makes them a powerful coach, right? So they are able to then, like I say, they are able to go out there and actually help you, and give you advice and take you through a process where they're getting you to think, but also giving you, like I say, really good perspective, and sharing their own experiences, right? So that's number 1, the mentor and coach. Number 2 is the confidant. And now this is a bit different. Huh? So don't confuse the two. The confidant doesn't need to be somebody who knows anything about your work or anything about your career, right? So the confidant is somebody you go to as a source of emotional support when you're stressed, when you're under pressure, when you're sad, when you're depressed, when you're disappointed, frustrated, angry, and you're going through difficult emotions, a difficult time. The confidant is the person that you trust, a safe zone, the person that you can talk to, and you can share things with, and they're not going to take advantage of that information. They're not going to break confidentiality. They are not going to use the information against you. They're not going to laugh at you. They're not going to point a finger at you. They're not going to judge you, right? So we talk about being able to listen in an unjudgmental fashion, and that's what a confidant can do, and of course, these people, they don't grow on trees, you have to build a relationship up with this person over time, right? So it could be a childhood friend, an old school mate, a former classmate, university mate, a colleague. It could be a husband and a wife. In a sense, the marriage relationship is supposed to be like that. You're supposed to be confidants to one another. You can come and share things with each other, and you don't use that information against one another, right? So whoever it is, all of us need somebody that we can talk to, right? And number 3 is the fun stuff. So this is the fun bit. It's not all serious stuff. You also need a group of friends, or at least 1 or 2 friends that you can just go for stress relief. And these friends, look, it's not about any kind of serious talk or relationship. Sometimes you just need friends that you can go crazy with, right? And just have a good time with, and just relax and let your guard down and have fun together, right? And so some people, they find these funsters because they may share common interests. So maybe all of you like to play badminton or a certain sport, or go jogging, or exercise in the gym, or swimming together, or watch movies together, or maybe you want to form, I don't know what, the Sherlock Holmes club, or stamp collecting club, or Korean drama club, or whatever it is, But what brings you together is that all of you enjoy doing the same thing, and so it's just a weekly good stress relief and outlet to be with this gang, right? And just have a good laugh, have a good drink, enjoy food together, and just, like I say, just have a good laugh and let your guard down. And by the way, all of these three people you can still connect with in an MCO, and so that's the good news. So even the funsters, I think one of the advice I gave last week was stay connected, right? So during this MCO thing, it's important still. So you can still hang out with your funsters and have a good laugh for 1 hour and just have a good time. All right. So these three groups of friends, now by the way, they are usually not the same people. It can be, but that's more rare. And so don't go out looking for that one person that can do all three. Chances are you're going to live your whole life and not find this person. So I think it's really important that what you're doing is looking for these three social support networks. And the term is really looking. It's not about waiting for something to happen. I talk to many people and they say, well, Dr. Goh, I don't have a mentor and a coach. There's nobody in my office or my workplace that I look up to. Fine, look for somebody outside. I mean, it doesn't need to be a colleague in your company. It could be somebody outside. If you're more comfortable, talking to somebody who is not in your workplace, that's fine. Same thing with the confidant. Same thing with the funster. I mean, even the funster, I've got some people who come and share with me and say, you know what, I don't really enjoy being with my friends, to be honest. I mean, these are friends that it's true, I've been with them for a long time, but now, we've grown different, we've gone in different directions. To be honest, I don't really enjoy spending time with them. Then I would say, look, then search, find people that you can really have a good time with, right? So the key is to be deliberate about this, to be proactive about this. Don't wait for things to happen. Actually go out there and find somebody, right? Number 5, physically fit. I think this one we all know, this is one of those, it's easy to talk about because we all know what needs to be done, but we really just don't do it. So physical health is linked to resilience. I mean, you want to be a resilient person, you need to be a healthy person, right? So whether it's exercise, good eating habits, adequate rest, drinking enough water, right? Having good posture, making sure you're not slouching, So all of these are good physical habits. And what you find is people who are physically fit, they are really in a better position to be also psychologically and emotionally resilient, right? Even though those two things are not exactly the same thing, but we talk about healthy body, healthy mind. Okay, and I think the reason for that is it's really energy and stamina. I mean, what I find in my own life, is I need stamina, and it's not because I'm running marathons every day or because I'm in a line of work that requires a lot of physical work, but the fact that I need mental stamina. I mean, so being in 7, 8, 9, 10 meetings every day, especially during this MCO time, I mean, lots of Zoom meetings. You really need to pay more attention. I mean, Zoom meetings actually are more tiring than physical face-to-face meetings. So I mean, for me, 7, 8, 9, 10 meetings every day, I'm required to use my mind, making decisions, weighing up different options, being creative, thinking of ideas, solutions, all these kind of things, I mean, require a lot of mental effort. And I suspect that many of you are in jobs that require that mental effort. So what the organization is paying you to do is actually mental rather than physical. But I mean, you realize how a lot of people, they can't last. I mean, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour, I mean, beyond that, their mind starts to wander. They're not able to focus, concentrate, their brain is not able to generate new thoughts or ideas. And to me, part of that is actually physical health, that maybe we're not looking after ourselves enough. And because our bodies are weak, therefore our mind also, we don't have that stamina, right? And I think this is something we really need to work on. Okay. Now, the last tip before I end today's session, coming to 5:30 now, is to develop pride in our work. And I know that that sounds a bit out of place. What has this got to do with resilience? But look, I think finding that psychological strength, to get up every day and to, face difficulties and challenges and sometimes even boredom, in our work, in our lives. One of the things that I think gets us through is the motivation, the inspiration that comes from taking pride and joy in the work we are producing. I've got a story to illustrate this. Uh, I know this is a bit small, but this is a picture of the Sistine Chapel, and you can visit it in the Vatican City in Rome. And of course, this is one of the most famous frescoes, and decorated halls anywhere in the world, right? It was completed and done by one of the Renaissance masters, Michelangelo. So that's a picture of Michelangelo. And I remember for many years, I mean, for the last, to be honest, I can't remember, maybe back to 12, 15 years, I was using, this, anecdote as an illustration for pride in work. I was talking about Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel and the fact that it took him, 3, 4 years to finish it. In fact, there are two different portions of it. He did the first portion in a few years, and then he came back many years later and he finished the front and the back. And the interesting thing was, until 2 years ago, I never visited the Sistine Chapel myself. But 2 years ago, I was blessed with the opportunity to actually go there and be in Rome. Actually, now 3 years ago, to actually visit it. And then last year, I went back with my family again, and a second time to be in this Sistine Chapel, and it's amazing. I mean, very crowded though, lots of tourists, but it's an amazing experience. I mean, being a fan of the Renaissance since I was young, since I was a university student, and my minor in philosophy, and I did papers in Renaissance art, and I was big fan, of the Italian Renaissance, and reading people like Michelangelo and Raphael and Da Vinci and a whole bunch of them, and being there, and just the opportunity to sit and walk around this amazing place, and watching this amazing art, and appreciating it for the 20-30 minutes that they gave us when we were there. That was quite an experience. So now when I tell the story, I think I tell it with a little bit more conviction, because having stood there in that Sistine Chapel and realizing how special that work of art was, I think adds a bit of weight to the story now. So I'm going to tell the story. I'm quite sure it's, apocryphal, meaning that it's a legend, it's a myth, it probably did never happen, but I think it's an anecdote that illustrates the point that I'm going to make. And there's a story about, Michelangelo is up there, and he had to actually build the scaffolds, by the way. In those days, the artists used to do everything. You build the scaffolds, the structure, so that he's up there 100 feet, and he's sort of, standing and bending down, so the idea that he was lying on his back was actually not true, so I mean, when we took the tour, they would say, he actually did this standing up, to the point where after 2-3 years, he actually developed a permanent spine and a back problem, because he was sort of, in this position, having to bend his back to look up. But he's up there 100 feet in the air, and the story goes that, somebody walks in, a friend walks in, and he asks Michelangelo, okay, what are you working on today? And Michelangelo says, look, I'm working on this part of the mural that is the finger of one of these key characters, and I'm perfecting this finger, the fingernail of this character that is up on this ceiling. And I've been doing this for the last 4 or 5 hours now, because it's not perfect yet. And the friend sort of looks up and he says, don't waste time, Michelangelo, because you know what, from this distance, from 100 feet away, like the view you're seeing now on this slide, it's so far away, and the ceiling is so high, to be honest, I can barely see the hand, let alone the finger. So don't waste your time, Michelangelo, because nobody else is going to notice that the painting is not perfect. So don't waste your time. And Michelangelo sort of, takes a minute to think and reflect on what his friend has said, and he says, you're right, you're right. Nobody else will know that it is not perfect, but I will know. And I think that's sort of the spirit that sometimes is lost in our busyness, in our work, the fact that, we are working for money, we're working to support our families, and all of that is perfectly legitimate, and that's normal. But I fear sometimes that as a generation, as a human race, we are starting to lose that sense of pride in the workmanship, in what we're actually producing. That pride in trying to accomplish, what we define as perfection. I mean, we know perfection is not possible. I mean, perfection is this, hypothetical concept. I mean, what is perfection? That's subjective. But when I think about people like Michelangelo, the painter who is spending hours and hours painting this thing, half of which you probably can't even see at 100 feet from the floor. But that heart and soul, that wholeheartedness he puts into this work because of the pride he takes in this accomplishment. He's almost saying, look, I don't care, I mean, whether the audience fully appreciates or grasps the perfection in the work or not. But in the end of the day, it's whether I can look at myself in the mirror to see, have I done, all I can do, I'm reminded of, other artisans. I remember, watching this documentary called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. Some of you may have watched it, about this, 70, 80, now 90-year-old Japanese sushi master in Tokyo, right? One of previously at 3 Michelin stars. They've actually, not got the stars anymore because he's no longer taking public guests as of a few months ago. But, Jiro Sushi, very, very famous, Barack Obama, presidents, kings have all dined there, in this basement of some subway in Tokyo. And they say it's one of the best sushis anywhere in the world. And the documentary, sort of charts the fact that he's been doing this for 60 years, and he was asked, do you think you've achieved perfection yet? And he says, no, I'm still finding ways of how to do the seaweed better, and how to, prepare the rice better, and how to prepare the sushi better. And 60 years of focusing on what he regards as perfection. Now that's pride of work. Each time he's serving a customer who comes in, to have this gourmet meal of sushi. 60 years, and we live in a time where we get bored so easily, so quickly we change. We are moving, I guess, being part of a VUCA world. But then you've got to admire people like the Michelangelos, 3-4 years of painting this same mural. People like Jiro Sushi, 60 years of doing the same thing, and every day, every week, just thinking of how can I do it a little bit better, and I you've got to, I think, admire and take some of that quality that these masters had, and try to integrate it with my own worldview, my own life, the way I see work, so that everything you're doing in work is that effort to try to attain that level of perfection, that level of satisfaction. And look, I'm not saying that we need to drive ourselves crazy being perfectionists. I mean, it's a balance, I understand. To me, it's it's sad when when we don't have any pride of work anymore, when we don't care anymore. We're just punching in, punching out, doing the minimum, and the irony is that I think it's that lack of I don't care, that lack of personal pride in the work, that striving for, for perfection, that actually leads us to a place where we may actually lack the resilience to face challenges, that resilience to face head-on challenges. And look, I know we will never hit perfection, but I think it's a nice notion to have, that because we are reaching out for it, and we are taking so much joy and pride in what we are creating, that therefore we are able to see past the day-to-day challenges, see past the day-to-day crisis, and the different obstacles that inevitably we will have to overcome, in all as part of the journey to actually a certain level of work. So I mean, that pride of work, that's something I'm always looking for in colleagues and in staff and team members, that sense of, hey, look, we push ourselves, because at the end of the day, whether I'm completing a project or a art design or a campaign or anything, I want to be able to look back and say, look, I really put my heart and my soul into this, and therefore I take this joy, because it's like the farmers, right? You under the hot sun, to plant the seeds, to look after the seeds, to sort of tend to the harvest, and then at the end, when you harvest everything, there's that moment of true celebration, true accomplishment, happiness and joy at what you've done. And I think that cycle, sometimes I worry that in this day and age we've forgotten that cycle, and that cycle is important. That no pain, no gain, that's important. The fact that sense of accomplishment and pride, I mean, it doesn't come easy. I mean, we tell our students that all the time, that nothing that is worthwhile in life, comes easy. Whether it's your studies in school, or achieving good grades in your exam, or being a good leader of your clubs and societies, or achieving a gold medal at the Olympics, or finishing a university degree, or whatever it is. I mean, any good thing in life, it is requires that effort, that pride of achieving something that is important to you. So I just want to end with that. So that's my final tip: develop pride in your work. And you find that when you take joy and pride in your work, you will find that inner resolve and resilience to be able to make it through, even the most difficult. I want to end with this picture. I thank you all for participating and for listening in for this last 1 hour. Some thoughts about how do you build resilience, and I end with the way I began. I mean, to climb Mount Everest, you can't wait for Everest to come to you. I mean, Everest is not going to make itself easier or shorter or less steep or less cold or less challenging, or less. Everest is not going to bow to anybody. Everest is Everest. For us to conquer Everest, we need to become stronger. We need to develop that resolve, whether it's psychological resource or social or intellectual, strength to make ourselves news from the stories of. It's in all of us. Nobody is born strong or weak. All of us, all of you have within you the resources you need to build. You just need to make a decision that that's the kind of person you want to be. That you want to be a stronger person, and you're doing things to develop yourself, to grow yourself. All right. So never ever look down on yourself. I mean, nobody's ever a lost cause. There is always a way, a roadmap to achieve your Everest. So you need to believe that this resilience comes from within you. All right. So I want to thank you all again for listening in. All right. Thanks for taking time to share this hour with me, and I want to wish you all the best. So once again, for my colleagues in Sri KDU and in Real, I know it's I mean, the 4 weeks, it's not been easy going through this MCO period, but the fact that like I say, you're taking time to listen to ideas, I think it's a good sign that you believe that as a person you can grow, and a person that you can develop. And all of us need to believe that we are still work in progress, that we still have an opportunity to grow and become stronger. So I want to thank all of you again, and wish you all the best for this next coming week as we continue to face this MCO situation. Please keep safe. God bless you and your families. Thank you very much.